Lori here. I'm here today to do a video that I don't think I've ever done on my channel before, but I went on Twitter, I went on Instagram, I went in a few of the bookish related groups that I am in, and I had people give me prompts. So I'm going to recommend books to you guys. I also did just hit 380 subscribers on this channel. Thank you guys for following me. I really do appreciate it. And if you want me to do this video again, because I don't have a community tab yet, maybe one day when I get to 1,000, comment. I never get comments on this channel, but comment below and give me a prompt that you would like me to do in round 2 of this video, and I will happily do it. But the first one is recommend your favorite 2021 romance. I have to go find these books. Some of them I don't have physical copies of but my favorite 2021 romance. All right, I'll be back with it. I recommend Take Me Home Tonight by Morgan Matson. This one came out, I think it came out in May or June. It's been a couple of years since we had a Morgan Matson release, but this basically follows two best friends. There's a theater component, and they wind up going, they're from Connecticut. They wind up going to New York City, and a lot of things happen. They wind up losing their phones, they get separated, they have a lot of drama. There's also a subplot that is connected back to Connecticut. I just like this book. It was a lot about friendship, a lot about self-discovery. As a theater teacher, it had a lot of theater elements about like theater culture in high school. It also really talked a lot about the girls and their relationship and how different they were. This is the first Morgan Matson book that was set in dual, well, triple point of view technically, which I really liked. And I live on Long Island. I work in the city, so I like seeing the city as a character in this story. And just loved seeing the adventures that I got up to. It was a really, really fun read. I don't think it was my favorite Morgan Matson book, but I did really enjoy it. And I was happy that she took a little bit of risk. She did that really unique subplot, which I don't think I've ever really read before. It had like an adventures in babysitting vibe to it, but I really enjoyed it. And as a theater lover and a theater teacher, the theater element of these kids was super fun. The next prompt is pick a book that made you ugly cry. I'm gonna have to go think about that. Cry when I'm reading books. I'm more likely to cry during like TV shows or stuff that like tugs at my emotions, but I came really close to tears throughout the last like 50 pages of Lost in a Neverwoods by Aiden Thomas. For those that don't know, this is a new release. It's his second book. He actually wrote this book before Cemetery Boys, and it's more like a mystery thriller with a Peter Pan twist, but you follow this girl named Wendy. 5 years ago, she went missing with her brothers, and then 6 months ago, I think she returned and her brothers didn't. But 5 years later, when kids start going missing again and a young boy named Peter comes to town, she has to start to uncover the mystery of what happened to her and her brothers. And I really devoured this book. The last 50 pages I was not emotionally prepared for, and that's why it like caught me a little bit off guard, but I really, really like this book. It definitely kicked me in the emotions, I will say that, and would go in expecting that. But it was definitely like a unique read, and I really did enjoy it. And it was probably the first mystery thriller that I read this year that really got me, but I really did like it. So definitely check out this one. This one was my recommendation for a book that made me ugly cry. The next prompt is read a book about a group of friends. Oh my goodness, there's so many for this. I'll say right off the bat, just because like I love the Shadowhunters, the entire Shadowhunters world, they have some incredible friendship dynamics. No matter what series you pick up City of Bones, if you pick up the newest series, Chain of Iron and Chain of Gold, if you pick up Lady Midnight, there's always a friendship group in that story that is like really captivating and will take you like 3 to 6 books. So I always talk about the Shadowhunters because I think that Cassie Clare does a really good job writing friendships, but I will also give you a contemporary version of that, and I just have to go get it off my book. I'm going to give Morgan Matson another shout out and tell you about The Unexpected Everything. This is my favorite Morgan Matson book probably to date, but it just follows a really fun group of friends, and I really, really enjoyed it. But basically you follow this girl named Andy. She has a perfect summer set out to happen. She is going to get this like amazing internship. She has a great group of friends, yada, yada, yada. But a scandal with her dad causes her to lose her internship, and she winds up dog walking as like a part-time job, and she comes across a boy named Clark, and everything devours from there. But the friendship group in this story is probably one of my favorite friendship groups of all contemporaries. It tackled so many issues in this story about friendship and growing up and self-discovery. The romance was really, really sweet, but at the end of the story, this was a book about friends and about, you know, your friendship group expanding or shrinking, and it was great. So if you've not picked up The Unexpected Everything, I would definitely recommend you check it out. All of her books do have like a strong friendship element. Her newest book I just talked about does have a friendship element. All her stories do have a friendship element, but this is the one where I felt like the friendship group was probably my favorite, and I'm definitely due for a reread soon. And then the next prompt is a book set in a place you want to visit. This is easy. I don't have a copy of this one anymore, but I am going to talk about Love and Gelato by Jenna Evans Wells. Here is a photo. Out of time. We are currently in the middle of a pandemic, but if you have been watching this in real time, then we are in the middle of a pandemic. And I have not traveled in so long, and I am getting such the itch to travel. I actually have a trip coming up in December to go to Disney, but one of my big dreams is to go to Italy, and that is why this book is so special to me. It is a girl winds up, after the death of her mother, she winds up going to visit her dad in Italy, and it just goes there. The romance was super sweet. It put a smile on my face. It made me incredibly happy. It gave so many elements of, like, you know, just traveling and learning yourself around Italy, and I really enjoyed it. So definitely a book that's on my list to, like, the series I want to reread or continue reading. I have Love and Olives over here. It's on my July TBR actually, but really, really enjoyed that book. I thought it had so much travel elements, a lot about self-discovery, and a fun romance to boot. So if you're like me, you can't travel yet, definitely pick up a travel novel. But for me, definitely Italy. If you have any books set in Italy, recommend them below, because I don't know of a lot of them, but definitely that's a location I've been dying to travel to, and I will get there eventually, and I'll probably take you guys along. The next prompt is a book about a horse. I don't know if I'm gonna have to think about this. I might have to get a little bit creative with this one, but I will be back. And this one is going to be a little bit sad, but I do have two sort of horse-related books. One is Percy Jackson, and I just keep thinking of Blackjack the Pegasus, and they fly around him on a horse, and he's a pretty consistent character in book 3 in that series, book 3, 4, and 5 in that series. So he comes in I don't remember the name of the book, but he comes in that third book. But also another book that has horses. It's not really a horse, but it's a unicorn, is the Keeper of the Lost City series. Silverny is an alicorn that sort of comes in book 2, but she's a very, very prominent character in that. And it's great. If you have not checked out Keeper of the Lost Cities, it's a middle grade series that is definitely my favorite middle grade series in recent years. I really do love that series a lot, and it just I think this might have came from my Harry Potter group that I have, so maybe I'm going to recommend Keeper of the Lost Cities. It's a great middle grade series. Right now I think we're in book 8. Like, we just got like a companion book that came out in April, and I finished it, but I'm really excited to see where the last book of that series goes. But it does have an alicorn, which we can say is a horse. But also, Percy Jackson does have Pegasus as well. But I don't think I've ever read a book that had horses in it as, like, characters, I guess you could say. Like, I've read a lot of high fantasy stories that have horses, but I haven't read any, like, magical horse books. Again, if you have any recommendations for me, link them below, but I can't think of any, so I might have cheated with that one a little bit. But the next book is a non-fiction book in general, or the subthing was cults. So I actually do have 2 recommendations for that, actually 3, and I will, because they're both, it's like 2 sides of the same story, and then another non-fiction that I have loved. So I'm back. Non-fiction book I've ever read. So, and I haven't talked about it in a couple of years, because it's been a couple of years since I read it, but I Will Always Write Back is by Caitlin Alafranca and Martin Ganda with Liz Welsh. This is a story about, and it's just such like a heartwarming story. This book also made me bawl, I will say that as well. But you basically follow these two characters, Caitlin and Martin, and one lives, I think she lives, I feel like she lives like in Washington State, and he lives in Zimbabwe. And you know, like when you get like a pen pal from another country and you write for like 4 times, maybe 2 times, and then it never happens. That is not the case for these two kids, and they just strike up a relationship and a friendship, and they continually write letters to each other. And Caitlin winds up transforming his life in ways that like I don't think Martin ever imagined, Martin's family never imagined, and it not only like transformed his life, but it also just gave him a best friend. And I devoured this book. I think this book was so important, and it just really captured me from page one. It spans from like 1997 to 2003, so it's a very, very long friendship story, and it's just one that just shows like how one act and one thing, writing a letter to somebody, can really transform their lives. And I'm still talking about this, makes me very emotional, because friendship is just such an important fracture in our lives. And these two kids from two totally different countries, one random act of fate being assigned a pen pal, really just transformed both of their lives for the better. And I really do need to reread this book. I'm gonna actually, now that I've pulled it out, I'm probably gonna add it to my TBR, but I really, really love this book. It doesn't get nearly enough love and attention, so if you want something that's going to make you cry and like tug at your emotions, definitely pick this up. If you're teachers, add this to your classroom library. I highly recommend it. But someone did say cult book, so I do have two sides of the same exact coin. I haven't read one half of the story yet, but it's pretty much the same story. But this is about the NXIVM cult that's been in the news recently, especially because it has to do with Allison Mack, the former actress that was in Smallville. I don't know if you've been paying attention to the news, but it's been everywhere because they were sentenced recently. But the one that I'm going to talk about is Captive. I think it's called Captive, and it's by Catherine Oxenberg. But here is a photo. Very, very hard to read. But you basically follow Catherine Oxenberg. She's a former Dynasty actress, and her daughter got sucked into this cult. And you follow her not only getting into this cult, but also trying to get her daughter frantically out of this cult. If you're more of a visual person, there is a documentary on HBO Max called The Vow. And there's also, the other book I was going to mention is India's Story, and there is a documentary that India did on Stars. I don't know the name of that one, but that was like, again, I watched that as well. But I didn't get around to reading India's Story yet. I hope to tackle that one soon. But it is just a very, very gut-wrenching story about what you as a mother, have to do to protect your child. And I just thought it was a very interesting take on it. So if you have read all the stuff and want a more personal account, I would definitely recommend both of these reads. But I did get to read Catherine Oxenberg. So I gave you 3 recommendations for that one. So and the next one is a book that scared me. I'm going to have to think about that one for a little bit. I really don't, I'll be honest, I don't read books that I think are gonna scare me. I just don't. Like, I much more like eerie and creepy things rather than like pure horror. Like, I have one book on my TBR right now that I think might scare me, and that's Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. But I don't like horror movies, so I don't read them. But the only book that I remember that like scared me or like creeped me out enough to like pause my reading was Gemina by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. In that series, and you follow Hannah and Nick, and there was a lot of elements in this story that was like horror elements, because they were creating a creature that you didn't necessarily see coming, and then there was a whole other invasion. So those things together really did scare me, and I was like, oh my goodness, if I was in this situation, I think I would pass out from like being so scared. But the representation of them making these creatures really did like make me nervous and anxious. But I still do love the series. It's probably one of my favorite science fiction series to date. But that one book, definitely, like, the animal elements in that really did make me freak myself out. And the next prompt was, what is a recent book that made you laugh? So I'm gonna go look at my video books and then give you guys thoughts. But I do laugh quite often. I much prefer to laugh in my reading than be scared. I distinctly remember laughing out loud at, and it does not get nearly enough love and attention, so I could probably also add this for a prompt later. But it's Yes, No, Maybe So by Becky Albertalli and Alicia Saeed. Here's a photo. This book is very, very politically focused. It is set in the aftermath of the 2016 election. And it's set in, I think it's set in Georgia. And it basically follows this young Muslim teen and this young Jewish boy, and their paths cross when they wind up working on this campaign to get a Democrat elected. And it was just laugh out loud funny. Like, there was some moments in this book that just I could not stop laughing. I thought it was so incredible, so funny, but also really dealing with hard topics like racism and, why rules matter and why we should fight for rules that we don't think are fair to some people. So it was a very, very poignant read, but also just super funny. The romance the relationship between these two characters, there was some laugh out loud moments that just made me very, very funny. Also, a lot of the Bridgerton books definitely have made me laugh recently, especially It's in His Kiss and On the Way to the Wedding by Julia Quinn. Those are the final two stories in that series, but I really did like those books a lot. Those made me laugh as well if you want something a little bit more lighthearted. Definitely all the Bridgerton books definitely make me laugh. But serious book with a funny twist was definitely Yes, No, Maybe So. And the next book on this list is a fave book written by a non-white author. So I'm going to go find that book for you guys. I have so many non-white authors that I like. I just do. I think that as I get older, and tell me guys if you guys would like me to do, I know people have been doing the whole reading diversely videos and why some people think it's like a gimmick, which I don't think it is. But if you guys want me to do a why I read diversely video, comment below and I'll happily do it, because I think it's imperative that we read diversely, because I just think it helps you see outside your own point of view. So I've been making a conscious effort to really figure, even just acknowledge, just know going in the background of an author. I just bought a book today called The Firekeeper's Daughter, just because the summary sounded really interesting and so outside of my framework. But two authors that have stood out to me in the past, I would say about year and a half. First one is a middle grade author, and I've never read anything by her before. I know she has an adult debut coming out as well, but it's The Last Fallen Star by Gracie Kim. It is set in the Rick Riordan verse, or it's a Rick Riordan Presents novel, and this is a story about Korean witches. I think her name is Riley, and she is from a family of Korean witches. She was adopted, so she doesn't have magic as her parents and her sister does. But when something goes wrong and her sister winds up being in peril, she has to go on a quest to save her sister's life. And I loved this book. I really, really did. I thought it was great. It reminded me of Teen Wolf Season 3. If you've been following me for a while, I love Teen Wolf. That season with the Korean elements was my favorite season by far. So I love this book. I devoured it. I need book 2 immediately, but it was great, and I definitely really enjoy it. And I just love Korean stories. I think they're really interesting. I've actually been reading a lot of Korean books recently, but this fantasy story was great. And then another book that I read relatively recently by another non-white author, I read it last year. It's Sounds of Stars by Alicia Dow. The story, but it's a science fiction story, and I picked up my copy at ALA, and the tagline in this book is, "Can their love of pop music and books save the world?" I was in. It is a delight. It just made me smile. It was so interesting. I have my eyes on Alicia Dow's Twitter feed, hoping she'll release a new book. It was great. One of my favorite science fiction books I've read recently, because I don't really read a whole lot of sci-fi other than a couple of established series, but I really, really love this book, and I thought it was great. So many conversations about being an African American person in this bizarre, not also in our time, but also in that time. It was really important and just a fun read. I also really liked both main characters, and it was great, but definitely will be checking out more by that author in the future. And then the next one is just a book by a woman author, which I'll be honest, I read a lot of women authors. I read more women authors than I probably do male authors. I'll be super honest. Um, but one of my favorite authors of all time is Alex Bracken, and I'll just to put up a photo of one of her recent books. This is sort of embarrassing, but before the pandemic, if I saw Alexandra Bracken, I think she'd know me by name. She probably doesn't know me anymore because it's been about like 3 years since I've seen her, but I love her. She wrote the Darkest Mind series, the first one of the first dystopian series other than the Hunger Games that I really loved. And I will say this, I love the Darkest Mind series way more than the Hunger Games series, a little bit more my jam. She also wrote a time travel series. She just put out a standalone called Lore. She wrote a middle grade series. She is really into the Star Wars verse. She's coming out with an Indiana Jones retelling soon. She is so versatile. She can write so many different things, and I thoroughly love her writing style. I think she really challenges a lot of author expectations and a lot of character expectations, and it's great. I know most people know her because she wrote the Darkest Mind series, and that was a movie that came out a couple of years ago. But the books are incredible, and she really does dive into relationships so well. If you want a book about a really strong group of friends, as someone mentioned earlier, another one of prompts, Darkest Minds has that as well. But she is a delight, and I love her books, and I'm always happy when I'm reading a Alexandra Bracken book. Sorry if I keep moving. My back is bothering me because I've been sitting here for like 30 minutes. My next prompt is a kid author, which is a little bit challenging for me because the only book I can remember reading really by a kid author is Aragon, but I am going to go do some research and see if there's anything else that I've read that like I didn't know was by a kid, but I'll be back. Finding one. The only book that I've read by a real teen would be Aragog, and I read the first book of that when I was a kid, and I thought that was really, really cool by Christopher Paolini. He wrote that when he was like 15. But another book that like is sort of written by a teen is When the Star Goes Out by Esther Earl, who was the girl that loosely inspired The Fault in Our Stars, and there was a book that came out after she passed away that was sort of written by her and her parents. But I've read a lot of like autobiographies by like kid actors, like and like kids in like gymnastic. Like I read Sean Johnson's autobiography, so I tend to read like more autobiographies that kind of dictate their childhoods, but they're a little bit older when they publish them. So like Christopher Paolini, which I still definitely do need to read because I never like read farther in that series. But Esther Earl is another one. I guess I just need to do some more like maybe I'm gonna do a reading vlog of like reading books by children because I really have not read any. So sorry, but the only two that I remember is I definitely read Aragog first book and I loved it, and then I just got like I felt a lot of pressure to read it because I just wanted to keep rereading and that moved me on. And then the Esther Earl book that was written by her and her parents, but I can't think of anyone else. If you have any books written by kids that you think I should read, comment below. I'm asking you guys to comment a lot because I never get comments, so it would be nice. And then the next prompt I got was a less read book by a famous author. I'll be back. So I always give this recommendation. Everyone's like, that is like not it. But for me, I am a big Rick Riordan fan. I read, and I know Rick Riordan has a whole former career where he wrote adult novels, but his Percy Jackson series blew up. It was so popular. No one talks about his Egyptian series, which is one of my favorites. So I'm going to talk a little bit about it and encourage you to read it. But here's a photo. Follow this brother and sister, and they wind up realizing that they're connected to Egyptian gods. It's very, very formulaic, very, very similar to his Greek mythology series, but I just really enjoyed it. It is a trilogy, and then they do tie in. There's like a tie-in novella where they go and they interact with the people in the Percy Jackson world. So definitely for the tie-in, I would definitely read the series. But it's great. It's also reminds me a little bit of what they're doing with the Shadow Crosser series now with J.C. Cervantes, which it's sort of like they're writing the book to someone. So like it's being dictated to someone and they're sending it to a publisher, which is what Rick Riordan has done in some other book series as well. But I really, really like the series. I love Sadie and Carter a lot. I actually really do want to get a reread of this because I really have been wanting to just take maybe like 6 to 7 months and reread the whole Percy Jackson canon. Let me know in the comments if you'd be interested in doing that because it's been a bit since I've read the earlier books in that series. But yeah, I always give this book a shout out and no one ever reads it. So go read the Red Pyramid series. It's only 3 books and they're really, really good. And the next book is a not common work setting. I have a really good one for this. By saying, normally when I recommend books like this, it's in bookstores or in libraries because I love books set in bookstores and libraries. Also, mansions. But this is a really unique one. It's called The Chapel Wars by Lindsay Lovett. Here is a photo. The first contemporary books that was not hard hitting that I think I ever read. It wasn't like a Katie McGarry. It was like a fun read, and it just follows these 2 people. They were in Las Vegas. They worked on opposite sides of the street. One was this small wedding chapel, and the other side of the street was this big like big box wedding chapel, and these 2 teens wound up duking it out, and I think one business was in danger of like closing. It was funny. It was a really, really fun work environment. They had really, really fun weddings as well. It was great. It sort of reminded me a little bit of reading We Can't Keep Me Doing This by Rachel Lynn Solomon because it did have a wedding element, but I never read a book set in like a wedding chapel. So that was really, really fun and unique. I read that quite a while ago. She has a couple of other books out, but that's the only one that I read by her. But yeah, definitely an interesting work environment set in like a wedding chapel in Las Vegas. And then the next book, favorite book with your least favorite trope. I'm gonna have to go think about that. Do you mean trope in like fantasy or contemporary? Maybe I'll do one of both. I'm going to do a fantasy version of this, and then I'm going to do a contemporary version of this. So the fantasy version is the chosen one trope. The chosen one trope is so popular. It's like so overdone at points, and I think that like sometimes it's just not done very, very well. However, I do really like that trope because I feel like when it's done right, it's really effective as being like a storytelling mechanism. So the first book series that I remember reading and like devouring this trope was City of Bones. I liked Clary as being the chosen one was it wasn't easy for her to sort of like come into that role. It took her books and books and books to feel comfortable with that. It wasn't until like the 3rd or 4th book she even like felt like she was consistent, and it was a hard journey for her, and I also just loved the progression of her character growth in that. So I know Cassie Clare gets a lot of hate, but I still do really like her books quite a bit, and I will always like that series because you got to meet Simon, and Simon's like one of my favorite characters. But then like on the contemporary side, I tend to struggle a little bit with love to hate, like enemies to lovers and enemies to more, because I don't always think that you as the reader get the history of it. Like sometimes I think that like you just they just hate each other and you just have to buy into it. Which I think is a little bit hard for me sometimes because you don't build that up. But someone that did that trope really, really well recently was Rachel Lynn Solomon for Today, Tonight, Tomorrow. Here's a photo. I loved about this story was that basically right off the bat you follow these 2 characters, and they have been long-time rivals to be valedictorian at their prep school in Seattle. And at the start of the book, one gets to be valedictorian, one does not, and they have this like scavenger hunt competition for the last day of senior year, and they wind up competing again. But I like this story because you got like found documents that sort of explain their rivalry throughout this book that I loved. And I thought Rachel Lynn Solomon really built up their hatred to friendship to more in 24 hours. And I just felt it was so natural, even though it was only a 24-hour book. So really, really enjoyed it. Very, very fun. And probably one of my favorite enemies to lovers that I've read recently. And then the next book is that one of your favorite books that you read when you were a kid. So we have to talk. I was a kid in like 1995 to 1999, like a little kid, and I was like in my teenage in like 2000s. There was no YA section until later. So I had very few options for books to read. I'll be honest, I read a lot of adult books when I was younger. I would read like, V.C. Andrews, which I do not recommend because they were horrific books. But I read V.C. Andrews. I read a lot of mysteries. That was just what I gravitated towards. I read Nancy Drew. I read a lot of books like that. But we didn't really have a YA section very, very much. So the one series that I still remember I really did like was the Medium series by Meg Cabot. Here is a photo. TV show when they made this, and it starred like one of my favorite actors, but it basically followed this girl named Jess, and she was struck by lightning, and from that she got visions of kidnapped people, and she could kind of work with the FBI to sort of bring them home. That was one series I really, really enjoyed. But as I was saying, the YA market didn't really hit until Twilight. So the only real book series of my childhood was Harry Potter. I'll be very, very honest. I read Harry Potter from 5th grade to when I was a senior in high school. So if you're looking for like a consistent series that I read consistently, it was Harry Potter. I know J.K. Rowling has made some disastrous choices, horrific comments, but honestly, at that point, that's what I was reading. I was reading Harry Potter books. I was on fandom sites. I was listening to MuggleCast, and that's what I did. But again, we didn't have a lot of options. So, like, I mostly read Harry Potter, and then I picked up whatever was going to be the next Harry Potter. But Meg Cabot was another author that I really did like. And then the last prompt in this video is talk about a book or recommend a book set in another country, and I have the perfect recommendations for that. This prompt we're going to chat about is a book set in another country, and we're going to talk about A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. Will be a 3-book series come August, and it basically follows this girl named Pippa, and as her senior project, she's determined to uncover what happened to her best friend's brother. Her best friend's brother was convicted of a murder, and he wound up passing away throughout this process, and she does not think that that is accurate. So she kind of goes undercover to sort of figure out what happened to this girl. And that's the first book. The second book is The Aftermath and focuses on a podcast. And the last book will probably wrap up the whole series. It's set in England. It's very, very interesting, very, very unique, very, very podcasty, very, very like thrillery. I really enjoyed it. And it's set in England, another place that once we can get out of our houses and lockdown is over and it's safe to travel, I'm going back to England. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Again, put your own comments below because I don't have like a community tab to access everybody. And I will do this again. I really do like combing through books I've read and giving recommendations. If you also have any videos you'd like me to see, again, I rarely ever get comments on this channel, please comment below and I will add them to my filming queue because I have off for another month and a half and I would love to make some more content for you guys. So stay safe, be well, and I'll see you guys later. Bye, friends.